All right. So welcome again to the Beginning Care Farmer series. My name is Kate Mudge. I work as a contractor with the Care Farming Network, and I'll be facilitating today's sessions with my colleagues Andrea Barnhart and Woody Woodruff. As we move through today's session on starting a care farm, you may have some questions. So I do want to make sure that you know that we also have some upcoming sessions in the series. As you can see, we're every Wednesday in September, we're exploring a different topic on care farming. And what we don't cover today, most likely will be covered in a future session. So we're going to be exploring some business models, facility and land options, and also funding a care farm. All of that the sessions are available for pre-registration on our website. And you may also notice that we are focusing these sessions on farms located heavily in the Northeast region of the United States that serve individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And this is because the Care Farming Network received support from the USDA through the Northeast Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Program, also called SARE. And they are allowing us to help pilot some new work in the Northeast. But we hope that this presentation and what we share in these sessions is helpful to anyone in any region serving many diverse populations. So what we're going to be covering today is what care farming is. We're going to share a brief history of care farming and our practices and exploring different types of care farms. And we'll also be spending some time on how someone interested in starting a care farm can do some research and develop their vision, and also the importance of establishing a network. We'll share lots of examples of care farms through the US and offer insight into how you can connect with other care farmers. And we hope that by the end of this session, you'll be more comfortable and more knowledgeable about how you could set your own strategy and tap into resources to craft your vision and gain clarity about a future care farm. This session is being recorded. It will be posted on our website, and we'll also be sharing a list of resources that are mentioned throughout this session, so you don't have to take a whole lot of notes. Everything that we're going to be mentioning will be emailed to you as a registrant after this session, sometime by the end of this week. As I said, we'll be having this presentation available online. And at the end of this 45-minute presentation, we're actually going to have about 15 minutes of Q&A. So if you have any questions that pop up, be sure to either type them in the chat or note them, and we hope to be able to have some time to explore questions at the end. Well, let's get into it. What is care farming? There's no single definition for care farming. It's sometimes called social farming or social care farming, but the definition that the Care Farming Network uses is very broad. It's the therapeutic use of farming practices for marginalized or vulnerable groups of people. And there are a lot of varieties and types of care farms, and they differ in types of farming activities. Some examples of farming are listed here on the slide, although they by no means are an exhaustive list. And here are just a few examples of what populations of folks are served by care farming. Regardless of the population served, we believe that care farms provide social interaction and support. They reinforce feelings of equality. They enhance confidence. They develop an awareness of well-being. They provide health benefits and meaningful work and activities. So just a brief touch on care farming's history, because it's really interesting. You know, care farms are very, very popular in the United Kingdom and Europe. There's thousands of care farms in European countries, and they're often connected to social service programs in places like Norway, Belgium, Italy, and the Netherlands. They have very well-established, not to mention well-respected and often well-funded care farming industry. And the first farms that we would today identify as care farms cropped up in the Netherlands back in the late 40s. But despite care farm's roots being Dutch, the term care farm gained traction at the turn of the century in the United Kingdom. And we know that there's about 1,100 care farms in the Netherlands, 1,000 in Norway, 900 in France, 675 in Italy, close to 300 in the UK. And here in the US, we have mapped nearly 200 and 30 care farms nationwide. And the Care Farming Network, which is a program of Red Wiggler Community Farm located in Germantown, Maryland, was Red Wiggler was founded in 1996 and is a sustainable care farm where people with and without developmental disabilities come together to work, learn, and grow healthy food. And CFN was created because others interested in care farming were contacting Woody at Red Wiggler. They were interested in care farming. They wanted to know how to start up their care farm. They had lots of questions if they were already care farming. And so throughout Care Farming Network's history, we have felt the need and attempted to fill the void of providing technical assistance and connections and information to folks wanting to start a care farm or who are currently farming. Excuse me. 2018, Care Farming Network hosted the Mid-Atlantic Care Farming Summit, and in 2020, we launched our website and the Care Farm Directory. As I said, we've got more than 200 farms in our network, and our aim is threefold. We want to increase awareness about care farming. We want to build capacity for new and established care farms, and we want to strengthen and build community for care farmers. So just as care farms serve diverse populations, they also operate using different models. And some offer employment and job training opportunities. Others provide therapeutic services such as animal-assisted or nature-based therapy. So here we have just some examples of care farms that are in our network that are providing employment and job training. We've got a Farm Less Ordinary located in Virginia, and they employ people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. They were actually founded by the parents of a son with autism back in 2016. And they deliver crop boxes and flower bouquets through their CSA. Capabilities, located in Massachusetts, is another example. And they provide individuals with training, employment, and opportunities to interact with the local community by offering organic and local food, flowers, gifts, art, and more. And most importantly, they cultivate a diverse and inclusive community for people of all abilities. To show that a care farm doesn't have to have a farm field, here's Greens Do Good, located in New Jersey, and they offer workforce development opportunities to teens and adults at a hydroponic growing facility in New Jersey. And moving on to therapeutic farms, an example of a farm offering animal-assisted intervention is Equicenter, located in New York. And they use therapeutic, equestrian, and horticulture programs to foster personal growth and individual achievement. They also have a 3-acre organic farm, culinary classes, and they provide services to those with disabilities, veterans, and at-risk youth. Allaire Community Farm is a dual-purpose nonprofit farm. They have ecotherapy programs for both the public and individuals with specialized needs. They utilize rescued animals and the working farm environment to nurture with nature special needs individuals and at-risk teens suffering from depression, anxiety, and self-harming. They also support veterans who suffer from PTSD, and their gardens and greenhouses support local families battling cancer by offering free weekly produce. When we talk about where care farms are, we often think rural. Here's an example of a therapeutic farm called Philly Goat Project, located in the middle of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And they provide education, therapy, and job training in partnership with the dynamic and delightful capacities of goats. And one more example, Mission Believe provides beekeeping education for veterans and first responders. They support the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of veterans and first responders through the practice of beekeeping. There's a couple other care farm models. There's licensed therapy and life-sharing communities. And some examples of licensed therapy is Cultivate Care Farms, located in Massachusetts. It's a nonprofit whose mission is to improve the lives of children and adolescents through farm-based therapy. And their licensed therapists use their farm and animals as a model for engaging clients in partnership with their clinicians and therapy sessions that involve activities that promote health and wellness for the clients and the animals. Simple Sparrow Farm, Texas, is a nonprofit trauma-informed care farm, and they collaborate with community partners to provide trauma-informed educational and therapeutic care farm programs and services for all ages, backgrounds, and abilities. Simple Sparrow also has a wonderful podcast to listen to, which we are going to be linking to in our resource page. Lastly, the life sharing community model. And one example here is the Creative Living Communities of Connecticut. And they create a shared inclusive living experience for individuals with and without developmental disabilities. You may be familiar with Campbell communities across the nation. There are more than 100 communities in 22 countries where people with and without intellectual disabilities live, work, and care for each other. They have a really unique history. Dr. Karl Koenig was an Austrian pediatrician and educator who fled the Nazi annexation of his own country and settled in Scotland in 1939 with a group of young physicians and artists and caregivers. And they founded the first Camp Hill community for children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Dr. Koenig and his colleagues were inspired by anthroposophy, the teaching of philosopher and educator Rudolf Steiner. And Dr. Koenig's vision was to develop Camp Hill communities together with people who have intellectual disabilities. And they really pioneered and developed the idea that if each member contributed his or her own special gifts and talents,
Andrea, I think that's where you come in.
Suite, located in Ohio.
We lost you, Kate.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, you froze as you were wrapping up Camp Hill.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. Well, I was moving from Camp Hill into Bittersweet Farms, located in Ohio. And they offer a community living program and day program for those with autism, focusing on horticulture, gardens, and animal care. Okay, list can go on and on. There's over 220 care farms on our map, and that's just a sampling of some of them. But today you're here to learn about how to start a care farm. And some of the ideas that we want to share with you kick off with understanding not only what care farming is and the history, but how to plan for a care farm. And like any good plan, research is really key to pinpointing potential challenges and developing an informed and long-term strategy. So first, you'll really want to spend some time learning about the community that your farm will be a part of. And these are just some of the questions to ask. Do not forget that there is support all around you. These examples include local agriculture offices and agriculture organizations, statewide nonprofit associations that can help you if you're going the route of being a nonprofit, figure out what comes first, beginning farmer training programs, small business development centers, those are offered through the SBA, and craft resources. And remember, you will be receiving a resource list after this meeting that includes a lot more resources along with links to some of these network resources. I just want to take 1 second here and give you an example. This is a personal example because I'm located in Minnesota and I bought a farm with my partner about 3 years ago and we want to start a care farm. It has been a long process to get through it. And this here just shows in my home state of Minnesota a few of the programs that I have reached out to and had conversations with people about mostly on the agriculture side of things, what resources are available to me. And you can see that there's, although I haven't taken advantage of all of them, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, at least here in Minnesota, we have just tons of resources available for beginning and emerging farmers that provide things like free technical assistance, farmer training, land access, all sorts of things. So my intention with sharing this slide is to encourage you to be looking around you for what your universities, local community, state associations, and whatnot might be offering. Your research should also include, if all possible, visiting other care farmers and local farmers in your area. And if not visiting, then speaking with, because there is so much to learn from others who have walked the path and learned really hard-won wisdom. This quote from John at LinkedIn Green summarizes what many others echo, that there is a wealth of information available to you if you actively seek out advice from others. As a network, Care Farming Network is here to offer support in many ways. We offer consultations, we offer monthly virtual member gatherings, and we're always willing to connect you with more care farmers in our network to have those conversations and learn from each other. So lean on us for support and allow us to help you connect with care farms in your region. We also have a pretty cool interactive map that many of you probably are aware of. You can filter that map that lists care farms by category or population served or location and other tags. So by all means, be sure to check that out. So now we're just going to take a bit of time to talk about how you can work with your inspiration to create a vision for your farm. So in any visioning exercise, there's some key questions to be asking yourself. Your core values, the problems you're trying to solve, and both your short and long-term plan. And then there are more questions to ask yourself, and these might be helpful to consider. But do not be overwhelmed, because this is a good practice. It is good to ask yourself these questions to both help ground you and guide you in a planning process. So learning from others is something that we believe is very important. So in the spirit of sharing, I would like to introduce Woody Woodruff, and Woody is the founder and executive director of Red Wiggler Community Farm. And I have heard Woody's story before. For any of you that have heard it too, it's always worth hearing again, because he's going to share his journey of starting a care farm nearly 30 years ago and answer some of the questions that our visioning questions pose, such as what inspired him to start a care farm, what factored into his decision-making process, who he partnered with, and what advice he has for aspiring care farmers. So with that, Woody, I pass it off to you.
And they've only given me 5 minutes.
I think I might even be a little ahead of time because I'm nervous and talking fast. So there you go.
Yeah, I don't know how grounded I was when I started Red Wiggler, to be honest with you. It's interesting thinking about that. I did hope that it would ground me. I was in my late 20s, starving artist. I have an art degree. And I was living in Tucson, Arizona. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I needed a job. I was washing dishes and they wouldn't even let me wait tables. I hated washing dishes. And so I took a job not knowing anything about working with people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. I took a job in a group home, and I worked 3 days pretty much straight, crammed 40 hours in 3 days. and then I could do my artwork the rest of the time. But what really happened was within a couple of weeks, I just fell in love with the work. I just really was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of fun. It exposed me to just differences that I just growing up never was really exposed to, and I just really became very enthusiastic in my job, getting paid $5.50 an hour and ending up working a lot of overtime. And I saw a couple of things, two, possibly three real issues that I wanted to see improved. One was the people I was working with, they didn't really have a meaningful job or a purpose. They were involved in what I call van therapy during the week. They just, you know, their day programs were not inclusive and were just really, it felt like there was so much room for improvement. And along those lines, I personally felt like meaningful paid jobs is what was needed to develop people's self-esteem and a sense of being a part of a community. I also noticed that the people I was working with were eating a lot of canned and salty and sugary foods and things, and that access to healthy food might really be helpful in their lives, as well as those of us who are living alongside of them in their group homes as caregivers. And then finally, the third piece of it was really that any sort of program really should be very inclusive. And I was really excited and just exuding enthusiasm and telling everybody that would listen that I wanted to start a community garden, and I wanted to develop a day program where, and this is where the name Red Wiggler comes from, that we would use underutilized properties in Arizona to create community gardens, and composting would be our main activity, and constructing these community gardens. And I like I said, super enthusiastic, and because of that, I raised a little bit of money without meaning to. I was in a bar at if you've ever been to the Congress Hotel in Tucson, I was telling a friend of mine what I wanted to do, and he said, what do you need? And I was like, $10,000. And he said, okay. So that was what I would call an angel investor, angel donor. And that was kind of like just, it gave me the push I needed to actually get something going. Because I had been kind of sputtering around for about 1.5 years with this idea, maybe 2 years. And then I came back east because I had a couple of sideline jobs. I guess I am a photographer, but I was shooting a few weddings here on the East Coast, and I had a weekend in between the gigs, and a friend of mine was living in Maryland on a farm, and I was like, well, you're halfway between my 2 gigs. Can I stay on your couch? Well, that was Reed and Nancy Treadaway, and they weren't really squatting. They weren't really paying rent either. A family had let them start a CSA, a community supported agriculture program, 3 years prior. And they really wanted to have their own property. And so they were moving out of state. And I was like, well, who's taking over? And they said, well, the family's looking for somebody. And they've had a couple of people, but nobody's really biting. Everybody's a little bit tentative. And I was like, well, I've got $10,000. And this CSA model, remember, this is 1995. Not many people knew what a CSA was. But I was like, that solves the inclusion problem. You've got the same customers over and over again. I'm over 5 minutes. That just really felt like a good thing. And so I moved in 1996 of January to the Morgan's farm here in Maryland. And they let me use their equipment and run a very small, and this picture here on the left with the boxes on the floor is that first year That was where we did our CSA boxes. We are a lot more careful with our food these days than we were back then. There were 12 shares and we hired, I guess I say we all the time, because in the beginning, you got to really make it seem like you're bigger than you are, because people really won't take you seriously. And that $10,000, I probably told people I had $10,000 probably 20 times. And, you just got to pretend like you're wealthy. And then when you get wealthy or you get going, you need to start pretending like you're poor. So, anyway, it was just couldn't have done it without that incubating family and farm. And couldn't have done it without, one of the people that was looking at the operation and setting up, he was very tentative. I called him up because I asked the family who else was looking at this opportunity, and I got their phone numbers and called them up. And there was one fellow, Louis Eby, who said, I'll come out and help you. And he was my mentor that first year. And this slide here talks about early pivots. And this is an important point, is you've got to develop a vision, an idea in the very beginning that you can talk about and show your enthusiasm. But you may not end up with that exact activity as what you're doing. I spent probably 2 years thinking about community gardening and how big the plots would be and learning how to compost and all of that, and really trying to get, some experience through the educating myself. But then the CSA model showed up and I was like, oh, that's it. That's the thing. And so as you develop your vision, remember that opportunities can crop up in the strangest of places. Anyway, I think that is an important point as you're getting going. And the other piece of it is that at some point you need to get going. And everybody's version of when to get going and when it's appropriate to get going is different. Some people will never get going because they're doing a lot of research and never really. So it's different for every operation, and it's super scary. It's never going to be perfect. So these are the 3 main pieces that got me going. I had secured, okay, it was 10 grand. That seemed like a lot of money to me, but honestly, it wasn't enough. But I was willing to put in a lot of sweat equity. And I had a volunteer who was awesome. I also should say that, so that was the key volunteer. The farm location happens to be about 20 minutes outside of the Washington, D.C. Beltway. We're a bedroom community of Washington, D.C. And the family didn't charge me rent for the first 5 years. After that, they did charge me rent. And today we are in a public-private partnership with our local park. And that's a whole nother story. I'm approaching 10 minutes, but I do want to say that there was a partner that I secured that first year. I called up the ARC of Montgomery County and I said, I've got $10,000. I want to hire a team of your clients, and I'd like them to come out to the farm and help me grow vegetables this summer, 1996, and I need a job coach. That job coach was awesome. She grew up in Iowa. She had been working with people with developmental disabilities going on 20 years. She herself was a polio survivor. She really understood inclusion and the meaning of, or the value of meaningful work. Because ever since the beginning, we've always paid our employees minimum wage or better. And with that, I better close. Oh, is that mine?
It is. I'll give you a prompt, but you've already mentioned it, Woody, about kind of getting going, that looks different for everyone.
Yeah, we've over the past few years, and in particular since 2018, we've talked with a lot of folks about getting the care farm going. Um, you have to create the vision. Yeah, you got to get some things in line, but sometimes you've just got to push go, and that's a tough thing. I like a lot of the advice that's been given here. One that I would want to underscore is really visiting other farms, and I would like to say that if you can, pay those people that you're visiting. Bring a check for $100. Tell them you're going to pay them for their time. You take it more seriously, and then the person showing you around their operation and talking with you about their program, they take it more seriously. You gotta, if you don't have $100 to put in, then you got to find other ways to do it. Like we have a farm tour, but visiting other farms is really important. And if you can, even intern or volunteer on some of them. But there's a whole lot more to it, and we've got 3 more sessions, and I hope that you'll join us for those, because you can't possibly. Well, it takes 3 sessions or 4. All right. Oh my, I went way.
Thanks, Woody. Oh, they were great.
I really did try to practice.
You have a great story, and thank you for sharing. This slide sort of indicates what Woody has already talked about, and it's called the Goldilocks principle. There's this idea of landing on what is just right, and also really understanding your capacity and who you'll serve, how you'll sustain yourself, and what you'll offer. With the understanding that, you might not end up with what you started with, but that journey will lead you there. And also this quote, which again speaks for itself. So as Woody just shared with us his wisdom, we had reached out to some care farms and asked them, what advice do you have for aspiring care farmers? So I wanted to share just a couple responses. And Amanda from Ohana Farm says this, said, I started super slow, which I think helped a lot. One thing I know is that many of the IDD schools and residential programs around me are always looking for meaningful things to do in the community, but doing them can be a challenge. So I've learned to take it very slowly and accept whatever help or involvement they can provide at whatever pace they can. I've set the goal to add to my program just a little bit each year, which has really helped. We also have reached out to Jen from Little Otter Flower Farm, and her advice for aspiring care farmers is talk with other farmers. I continue to be amazed with how kind and generous with their time and talents most other small local farmers are. She says, I have a background in business, but not farming, so I'm happy to talk with folks about business. But for farming, I'd suggest either trying local farms or growers that grow what you want to grow. Also connect with your local agricultural extension office. Have clear goals. Lots of folks will tell you to do this or that, and everyone has a new idea for you to try, but your time is your most limited resource. So stay focused on your priorities and reevaluate in the off season, or you'll drive yourself crazy. So some words of wisdom to share from those care farmers. We've said it before, we will say it again. We have 3 upcoming sessions that will provide a deeper dive into what type of model, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, or a partnership model. We're going to also talk about facility and land use, about kind of what you should be thinking about, whether you're looking for land, whether you have land, and a lot of those detailed considerations to take into place or into account. And how do I fund a care farm? This is probably one of the most common questions that we receive at Care Farming Network. So each of these presentations will also have somebody else sharing, as Woody did today, their personal journey on the specific topics. So I mentioned at the beginning that part of our work is being funded by a SARE grant. So we do ask that and kindly request that you complete an evaluation of this session. Andrea is going to throw it in the chat. It will also be shared post session. This is just going to help us. It's very short, we promise, but it helps us fulfill our grant requirements, allows us to offer additional sessions in the future. So thank you ahead of time for that. We are closing a little bit early, which just means that we have more time for question and answer. So I think what I'm going to do now is stop the share, and we will also stop the recording. And for those of you who have been curious about anything that has popped up,